All right, so welcome to Review Mash. It's your favorite AI-generated game review show, and today we are going super deep into South of Midnight.
Ooh, yes. I love a good deep dive.
Yeah, this is the newest game from Compulsion Games, who you might know from Contrast or the slightly disturbing We Happy Few.
Yeah, those guys definitely know how to make a unique game, and it seems like South of Midnight is no exception.
Definitely, and it's part of the Xbox family, now available on Game Pass, so a lot of people will be able to check it out, and right away you're going to notice the visuals.
Yeah, it's got like a really specific art style.
Yeah, super captivating. But honestly, for me, reading through these reviews, it's the story that's really sticking with me.
Yeah, it seems like a good one.
Yeah, like a really well-crafted, uh, almost dark fairy tale kind of vibe, and it explores like the effects of human pain and the consequences of it.
Ooh, that sounds heavy.
It does get pretty deep. And at the center of this is our main character, Hazel Blood.
I love a strong female lead.
Yes. And she's from this small Louisiana town called Prospero, and the setting really is like another character.
Yeah, the Louisiana swamps are like so important to a lot of the stories and the myths in that area.
Totally. And Hazel's life is totally turned upside down when this crazy tornado rips through Prospero. And she loses her home, and tragically, she loses her mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really sad. But from this loss, she discovers that she has this amazing ability to actually see and mend the threads of life.
Whoa, what? So, like, she's like a magical healer or something?
Yeah, kinda. The game calls her a Hilomancer.
Hilomancer. Okay, yeah, I think I saw that in one of the reviews. What exactly does that mean?
So it sounds like she can see like the connections between living things and then repair damage to them. And a lot of this damage comes from like, you know, serious trauma or pain that people have experienced.
Wow, that's pretty deep.
Yeah, so basically her journey is twofold, right? She's trying to rescue her mother somehow, but she's also dealing with like her family's past and all the kind of hidden pain that's been passed down through generations.
Ooh, so it's a family drama too.
Right. Big time. And it's really refreshing to see all these reviews highlight the representation of strong female characters, especially Hazel.
I was gonna say Hazel sounds like a total badass.
Oh, yeah, she's amazing. And it's great to see her praised for being like, so resilient and determined.
Yes. We need more female characters like that in games.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And then visually, oh my gosh, this game is just stunning.
I know, I saw some screenshots. The art style is so cool.
Yeah, it's like inspired by stop motion animation, so it's super detailed. Reminds me a little of Lost in Random, but like way more elaborate lighting.
Yeah, Lost in Random had really beautiful graphics too.
It did, and this is like another level.
So it sounds like Compulsion Games really nailed it with the visuals and the audio in this game.
Oh, absolutely. The reviews are just raving about the stop-motion style graphics, and it's not just a superficial thing. They really went all out with the details.
Yeah, one review said the details are just stunning. You can see it in everything, like from Hazel's facial expressions to like all the little details in the backgrounds.
It's crazy, and the way the light plays on everything, it just adds so much atmosphere.
Makes sense since they're going for that painterly look.
Yeah, and speaking of light, I kept seeing the word majestic used to describe the graphics.
Majestic, that's a good word for it.
Right? And I mean, I guess it makes sense, with those sweeping shots of the Louisiana bayou and the way the light filters through the trees.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly atmospheric and moody.
And speaking of mood, the music is apparently amazing too. Some reviewers are even predicting awards for it next year.
Wow, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and the soundtrack really leans into that Louisiana setting with like bluegrass, blues, jazz, and American folk music all mixed together.
Oh, that's so cool. It sounds like the perfect mix for this game.
And can you imagine like hearing harmonizing choirs and church organs with banjos and fiddles?
Oh my gosh, that sounds incredible.
I know, right? And apparently there are even original songs with lyrics that add like this whole other layer of depth to the story.
Wow, they really went all out with the music.
They did, and the sound effects are spot on too. Everyone is saying how great the voice acting is.
I bet the accents are really good.
Oh yeah, they're super authentic, especially if you're familiar with the American South.
That's so important for a game like this to really make you feel like you're there.
Totally. And one of the reviewers even described the whole audio-visual experience as creating immaculate vibes.
Immaculate vibes. I love that.
Yeah, and the sounds of the bayou, like the insects and the birds, it all just adds to that feeling of immersion.
Immersion is key.
Totally. And speaking of key, there's one key thing I wanted to mention about the technical stuff.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Most of the reviews didn't really have any major complaints about technical issues, but one did mention some slight stuttering on the Xbox Series S.
Interesting.
Yeah, it seemed like it only happened after using the quick resume feature, so maybe it's a minor bug.
Hopefully they patch that.
Yeah. And another thing to note is that while there are subtitles available in both European Spanish and Latin American Spanish, the audio tracks are only in English and Canadian French right now.
Oh, okay. So if you're not a speaker of those languages, you'll have to rely on subtitles.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
at least they have subtitles for multiple languages. That's always a plus.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so overall, it really seems like Compulsion Games created this super immersive and stylish experience with South of Midnight. And it sounds like it really works well with the story they're trying to tell.
Absolutely. They clearly put a lot of thought and care into crafting this world and making it feel both beautiful and believable.
Okay, so now let's dive into the story itself, the narrative and the themes, which seem to be like the emotional core of this game.
Yeah, we touched on it a little before, but this whole idea of a storybook narrative that explores these dark and painful human experiences sounds super intriguing.
Right, and it's not just the characters. The setting itself plays a huge role.
Yeah, Louisiana is practically a character in itself.
Totally. And the game really leans into the folklore and history of the region.
It's like they took inspiration from those classic Southern Gothic stories with all the eerie atmosphere and, the kind of focus on the darker sides of humanity.
Yeah, and then you've got Hazel's role as this Hilomancer trying to mend what they call the Great Loom of Life.
Right, the great loom of life. I'm really curious about what that represents.
Me too. And then you add in the themes of family conflict and the nature of pain and love and magic. It all weaves together to create this like truly epic narrative.
Wow, and it's cool that they're exploring these darker sides of Southern Gothic, but also these universal themes.
Yeah, it's a great blend. And the game really digs into those classic tropes like, the sense of decay and the focus on the supernatural and all that unsettling stuff.
But it sounds like they're not just relying on cheap scares, it's more about the psychological and emotional aspects of these themes.
Exactly. And I've got to say, the monsters that Hazel encounters sound terrifying, but also kind of tragic in a way.
Ooh, that's interesting. I love when monsters have depth.
Yeah. And then there's Hazel's own personal journey. Throughout the game, she starts out wanting to save her mother,
Hmm?
but then she kind of evolves and starts to understand her responsibilities as a weaver.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that earlier. What exactly does it mean to be a weaver in this world?
Well, it seems like it's connected to her abilities as a Hilomancer.
Okay, so she's not just like fixing things, but she's actually like weaving or reweaving these threads of life.
Exactly. And one thing I thought was really cool is that the reviewers mentioned how even Hazel's clothes change throughout the game to reflect her growth.
Oh, that's a neat detail.
Yeah, they said it's like a subtle way of showing how she's changing and becoming more confident.
And it probably ties into her heritage and her connection to the region as well.
Definitely. And then the way the game brings all this Southern Gothic folklore to life is just amazing.
I know there's so much rich material to work with in that area.
It's true. And they've done a great job of blending those local myths with the personal struggles of the characters.
Yeah, they mentioned a few creatures specifically, like Two-Toed, Tom the Rougarou, and Huggin' Molly.
Yeah, and it sounds like they've given these classic figures like a fresh take.
I'm always down for a new spin on old myths.
Right, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows either. The game doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of the region's history, like the remnants of slavery and the Reconstruction era.
Yeah, it's important to acknowledge that history and the way it continues to affect people today.
And it sounds like they do it in a really subtle way, like through visual cues, like abandoned houses with old eviction notices.
Oh, wow, that's powerful.
And then the focus on family dynamics is really central to the story, too,
Yeah, family can be such a complicated thing.
especially in the South where those ties run deep.
And Hazel's own family history seems to be a big part of her journey as well.
Yeah, she learns more about her mother's work as a social worker, and it helps her understand her own empathy and compassion.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It is. But one review did point out that the overall plot can feel a bit segmented at times.
So maybe the pacing isn't always perfect?
Yeah. But even so, they all agree that the game's portrayal of the American South is really earnest and respectful.
Yeah, it sounds like they went beyond the stereotypes to show the real struggles of the people there.
Exactly. And they also touch on how hurt people, especially within families.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is. And it's something that Hazel has to grapple with as she learns more about her own family history.
I'm really curious to see how they handle that theme.
Me too. And then the way the game deals with race and bigotry is pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I saw a couple of reviewers mention that.
They talked about how one of the past weavers was actually helping slaves escape to freedom.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then there's this visual contrast between the pristine plantation houses and the more vibrant world outside.
That's a cool way to show the different perspectives.
Totally. And all of this kind of ties into Hazel's journey as she discovers her powers and learns more about the past.
It sounds like she's on a classic hero's journey.
She is, and a big part of that journey is learning to understand and empathize with others.
Yeah, empathy is such a powerful force.
And it's central to this game. And there's some really touching stories about betrayed siblings and a mother's loss.
Ooh, that sounds heartbreaking.
It is. And then this whole concept of the grand tapestry is really fascinating.
Yeah, what is that exactly?
So it's basically like the fabric of the universe.
Yeah.
And Hazel can see these tears in it caused by trauma.
Oh, wow. That's a really cool visual.
It is. And it's a powerful way to represent the effects of pain and suffering on the world.
Yeah, and Hazel's ability to mend those tears ties into her role as a Hilomancer and a weaver.
Exactly. And one thing I thought was interesting is that not every encounter with a mythical creature ends in a big boss fight.
Oh, so it's not just like a monster of the week kind of
Yeah,
thing.
there's more nuance in that.
I like that.
Yeah. And the pacing of Hazel's quest is supposed to be really good, too. It creates a sense of urgency.
Yeah, it's got to keep you on the edge of your seat.
And Hazel herself is just such a compelling character. All the reviewers praised her performance.
I'm so glad they got a good actress to play her.
Me too. And the supporting characters are memorable, too, even the ones with limited screen time.
It sounds like they really fleshed out the world with all these interesting characters.
They did, and the overall message of the game seems to be about healing the world's wrongs through kindness.
Oh, that's a nice message.
It is, and it all takes place against this backdrop of dark and mysterious folklore.
Yeah, it's like those childhood stories that are kind of creepy, but also really captivating.
Exactly, and then there's the narrator.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. Who is it?
It's a giant talking catfish.
What a giant talking catfish. That's amazing.
It is, and it's hilarious, apparently.
I can't wait to hear it.
So the Deep South setting is just dripping with style and atmosphere. It's like you can practically smell the alligator-filled swamp water.
And hear the cicadas chirping.
Exactly. And the game doesn't shy away from the fact that folklore and fairy tales can be pretty gruesome.
Oh, yeah, they can be downright terrifying sometimes.
And the stories in this game are no exception. There are some really heartbreaking moments.
But it sounds like there's also a lot of hope and beauty in there, too.
Definitely. And one of the reviewers described the narrative as having this thoughtful message and a soulful world.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. They also said it's a poignant tale that's deeply rooted in the myths of the Deep South.
And it sounds like they're tackling some complex themes like trauma and healing.
Yeah, they're really exploring the idea that you can't always fix things back to how they were, but you can find ways to heal through listening and acknowledging hurt.
That's a really powerful message.
It is, and I really appreciate that the game doesn't try to sugarcoat the history of the Deep South.
Yeah, it would be disingenuous to pretend that everything is fine.
Totally.
No.
And they don't try to reduce the pain to some kind of cheap sentimentality either.
Good, because that would just feel disrespectful.
Exactly. And they also offer these really thoughtful reminders of resilience.
Like what?
Well, there's this one line that kept coming up in the reviews. These creatures aren't monsters. They're just waiting for someone who cares to come along.
Ooh, that's really beautiful.
Yeah, it really gets to the heart of the game's message.
And it shows that they're not just demonizing these creatures, they're trying to understand them.
Right, and the game's devotion to the people and places of the Deep South is really evident.
Yeah, they're clearly passionate about this region.
And they've created this amazing love letter to it, celebrating its myths, its sounds, its culture, and its language.
And they're not afraid to explore the darker sides of it either.
Yeah, they really embrace that Southern Gothic vibe.
I love a good Southern Gothic story.
Me too. And the characters are just so well developed, even the ones with limited screen time.
I'm always impressed when a game can make me care about even the minor characters.
And Hazel is just fantastic.
Right.
She's got so much spunk and snark, but she's also incredibly empathetic.
Yeah, she sounds like a really well-rounded character.
And her journey from wanting to save her mother to understanding her broader responsibilities as a weaver is really compelling.
It's a classic coming-of-age story.
It is, but with a magical twist.
I'm here for it.
So the story and the setting sound absolutely incredible. But what about the gameplay? How does South of Midnight actually play?
Yeah, let's talk about the mechanics.
So the reviews describe it as a hack and slash with some RPG elements.
Okay, so for those who don't speak gamer, what does that actually mean?
So basically, hack and slash means it's a very action-oriented game.
Yeah.
You know, you're running around fighting enemies in real time.
Okay, so lots of button mashing.
Pretty much. And you'll be stringing together attack combos and using special abilities to take down your enemies.
Sounds fun.
It is. And the RPG elements mean that there's like a skill tree where you can upgrade Hazel's abilities.
So you can customize your playstyle a bit.
Exactly. But one thing that the reviews kind of agree on is that the game doesn't really do anything groundbreaking in either of those genres.
So it's not reinventing the wheel.
No, not really.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as the core gameplay is solid.
True. And Hazel does have some really cool abilities. Like she can fly and throw these strings to get around.
Wait, she can fly?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And she learns spells that help her navigate the levels, which are often focused on these, really human issues that we've been talking about.
So it's not just mindless action, there's some thought put into the level design.
Exactly. But even with all that, the basic gameplay loop sounds kind of familiar.
Oh, how so?
Well, it seems like you spend a lot of time exploring to find these things called stigmata, which are like these manifestations of past trauma or pain.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then there are these chase sequences where you have to escape this character named Rue,
Ooh, a creepy stalker character.
basically. And then you have to fight bosses who have multiple health bars, so it takes a while to take them down.
So it sounds like a pretty standard action-adventure formula.
Yeah, it is. But they do mix things up a bit. As you progress, you unlock new abilities, and you even get to use this ragdoll named Cruton to sneak into small spaces.
A ragdoll named Cruton? I love it.
It's really cute, and Cruton adds a fun new element to the gameplay. And there are also collectibles to find, like fluff, which is the in-game currency.
Ah, so you can use that to upgrade your abilities.
Exactly. And then there are lore items that give you more background on the story and the world.
Cool. Cool, so it sounds like they've got all the basic elements covered.
They do, but it seems like the amazing graphics might have come at the expense of some gameplay innovation.
Oh, how so?
Well, one review mentioned that the levels are pretty linear, so you're kind of guided along a specific path.
So not a lot of freedom to explore.
Not really. But they did say there are some hidden secrets to discover.
Okay, so there's at least some incentive to go off the beaten path.
Yeah, and the climbing sections are apparently pretty similar to games like Uncharted God of War and Tomb Raider.
Oh, okay, so like those big cinematic climbing sequences?
Exactly, but with a southern twist.
I can dig it.
And Hazel's weaving powers are really useful for getting around. She can zip through the air, clear obstacles, and even summon objects.
Ooh, that sounds handy.
It is, and it makes those chase sequences really exciting. And then the combat itself takes place in these contained arenas against enemies called haints.
Haints, though, sounds spooky.
They're like these manifestations of pain and sorrow.
Yikes.
I know, and the combat is described as comfortable if predictable.
So it's not super challenging, but it's still satisfying.
Yeah. Hazel's attacks have a nice weight to them, and the different types of haints keep things interesting.
And then there's Cruton, who can, like, control enemies temporarily.
Yeah, that's a really cool mechanic.
It is, but some reviewers did say that the boss fights can feel a bit formulaic.
Yeah, they said it kind of exposes the limitations of the combat system.
Well, no game is perfect.
True. True. And overall, it seems like the gameplay is solid, but it's really the world and the story that make this game shine.
Yeah, it sounds like the story is the main draw here.
Definitely one reviewer even compared the combat to something from the PlayStation 2 or original Xbox era.
Oh, wow, so like a bit dated.
Yeah, but the platforming is generally well regarded, and Hazel has a good variety of moves.
Like double jump, dash, glide wall run, all that good stuff.
Yep, and those moves get more complex as you go.
Ooh.
But one interesting suggestion that came up was the idea of adding a skip button for combat encounters.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, like if you just want to focus on the story and the exploration, you could just skip the fights altogether.
That's a bold move.
It is, but it kind of tells you how some people felt about the combat.
Yeah, like maybe it wasn't engaging enough for them.
Possibly. And one reviewer pointed out that the gameplay loop can get a bit repetitive.
Oh, yeah. What is the loop exactly?
So basically, you arrive in an area, you learn about a troubled spirit, you clear out some enemies, you experience some fragmented memories, you navigate a platforming section, and then you fight the spirit in a boss battle.
Yeah, I can see how that could get old after a while.
Especially since those combat arenas seem to pop up pretty frequently.
And Cruton, while being a cool addition, can't save the combat from feeling repetitive.
Yeah, it's a shame because the platforming sounds really fun.
Especially with Cruton.
Oh yeah, he makes things way more interesting.
I bet. And then the puzzles, how are those?
Well, they're not bad, but they're not super challenging either. Mostly it involves using Hazel's weaving powers on these ghostly objects.
Okay, so like environmental puzzles.
Yeah, but the platforming really picks up in the later levels. It gets pretty intense.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
It is. But even so, the general consensus is that the gameplay doesn't really wow anyone.
So it's serviceable, but not spectacular?
Exactly. But the boss battles do sound pretty epic. They often incorporate traversal elements and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And Hazel's movement abilities make it really satisfying to get around.
Especially with that double jump and the grappling hook.
Oh yeah, she's got a whole arsenal of moves.
I'm liking the sound of this more and more.
But even with all that, the gameplay systems themselves aren't super innovative.
Well, sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel as long as it rolls smoothly.
True enough. Okay, so let's talk about how long it takes to beat this game.
Yeah, how much time are we looking at here?
Well, the reviews say that the main story can be completed in about 15 hours.
Okay, that's a decent length.
Yeah, and if you want to collect everything, it'll take you an extra 7 hours or so.
So a good amount of content for completionists.
Definitely. And the game does have an objective marker to help you find your way, but there's no map.
Oh, that's kind of annoying.
It is, especially if you're trying to track down all those collectibles.
Yeah, a map would be really helpful for that.
And the main collectibles are these things called floofs, which you use to upgrade your abilities.
Okay, so they're like the in-game currency.
Exactly. And they're often hidden just off the main path, so you got to explore a bit to find them all.
I like a good collectible hunt.
But one thing to note is that there's no chapter select feature.
Ah, so if you miss something, you got to replay the whole game.
Pretty much.
Oof, that's a bummer.
It is. But some reviewers did say they beat the main story in a bit less time, like around 10 to 12 hours.
Okay, so it really depends on your playstyle.
Yeah. If you're just focusing on the story, you can probably finish it faster.
Makes sense. All right, so final thoughts. What's the verdict?
Well, for me, I'm really loving the sound of this game. The story and the atmosphere seem incredible.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite part is how they've woven all this Deep South folklore into the narrative.
Yeah, it's such a rich source of inspiration.
And it reminds me a little bit of Hellblade. Senua's sacrifice in terms of the narrative depth and the focus on atmosphere.
Oh, yeah, I loved that game.
Me too. And it seems like the gameplay in South of Midnight is enjoyable enough, even if it's not super innovative.
Yeah, the individual stories within the overall plot sound really engaging.
And there's definitely potential for them to explore this IP further in the future.
I hope they do.
One reviewer summed it up perfectly. They said, it's a fantastic tale that's well worth experiencing, even if the gameplay doesn't stand out, and they gave it an 80 out of 100.
Solid score.
And a lot of other reviewers agreed, giving it 8 out of 10, praising the artistry, the heart of the story, and the incredible setting.
But there were some mixed opinions too, right?
Yeah, one reviewer gave it a 6 out of 10, saying the gameplay was bland and repetitive, and the story was predictable. Yeah, and another one gave it 4 out of 5 stars, saying the setting and storytelling were great, but the combat was underwhelming.
So a bit of a mixed bag, but mostly positive.
Yeah, overall, it seems like South of Midnight is a must-play for anyone who loves a good story and a unique atmosphere.
And especially for fans of Southern Gothic.
Totally. And the gameplay, while maybe not groundbreaking, is solid enough to carry you through the experience.
Exactly, and I think the strength of the narrative and the world they've created will outweigh any minor flaws in the gameplay for most people.
I agree. So based on everything I've read, I'm giving South of Midnight a 4 out of 5 matches.
That's a great score.
Yeah. I think the story and the world are truly memorable, and it sounds like a really unique experience.
It does, and it's great to see more games that prioritize storytelling and atmosphere.
Absolutely. So to sum it all up, South of Midnight is a game that you don't want to miss. It's got this incredible Deep South setting, a really moving story steeped in folklore, and those stunning stop-motion inspired visuals.
And don't forget the giant talking catfish.
Oh yeah, how could we forget him? So, while opinions on the gameplay might be a bit mixed, the overall narrative experience seems to be the real highlight of this game.
It's a game that will stick with you long after you finish playing.
And that's what we love to see, so we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on South of Midnight if you've had a chance to play it?
Yeah, let us know what you think, or if there are any other games you're excited about right now.
We're always looking for new games to dive into.
Until next time, happy gaming.
See ya.